This video is going to teach you how to do a simplistic 2D drawing of the brachial plexus to help you while studying and taking your exam. So we'll start with the organization of the brachial plexus. Moving proximally to distally, we have ventral rami, trunks, divisions, cords, and branches. The mnemonic to remember this order is remember to drink cold beer. So R, T, D, C, B. Okay, the brachial plexus comes from ventral rami C5 through T1. So starting superior, we have C5 ventral ramus, C6 ventral ramus, C7 ventral ramus, C8 ventral ramus, and T1 ventral ramus. And just as clarification, rami is plural and ramus is singular. So we have C5 through T1 ventral rami, but individually C5 ventral ramus and T1 ventral ramus. All right, after extending off the spinal cord, the ventral rami are then going to form trunks. The C5 and C6 ventral rami will come together to form the superior trunk. The C7 ventral ramus will just continue into becoming the middle trunk. And the C8 and T1 ventral rami will come together to form the inferior trunk. All right, each trunk will then have its own anterior and posterior division. We'll start with the posterior divisions because they are the simplest. All three of our posterior divisions are going to come together to form the posterior cord. Now you do have to specify which trunk each division is coming from. So here's our posterior cord. This would be the posterior division of superior trunk, the posterior division of middle trunk, and the posterior division of inferior trunk, all coming together to form our posterior cord. All right, and then our anterior divisions will split at the same time as our posterior divisions. So here's the split of posterior division of superior trunk, so coming off as well as the anterior division of superior trunk. Here's the split of posterior division for middle trunk, so splitting off with it is the anterior division of middle trunk. And then the anterior division of inferior trunk will split from the same place as the posterior division of inferior trunk. The anterior division of superior trunk and anterior division of middle trunk will combine to form our lateral cord. Again, all three of our posterior divisions will form our posterior cord. And then our anterior division of inferior trunk will just continue on and become the medial cord. So let's pause here and review and label everything we've drawn before moving on to the branches. We already have our ventral rami labeled, so next to our superior trunk, middle trunk, and inferior trunk. Next we have the divisions. Remember, you have to label them specifically. So anterior division of superior trunk, posterior division of superior trunk, anterior division of middle trunk, posterior division of middle trunk, posterior division of inferior trunk, and anterior division of inferior trunk. And then we have our lateral cord, posterior cord, and medial cord. Okay, moving on to our last section, the branches. We're going to start with the 5 major branches. In 220, you learned the M of the brachial plexus with the mnemonic Mickey Mouse University. I'll draw that again right here. So we're just going to take this and shift it up and attach it onto what we've already drawn. So coming off the lateral cord, we'll have the lateral contribution to median. And then coming off the medial cord, we'll have the medial contribution to median. And then these nerves will combine to form the median nerve, which will innervate the anterior compartment of the forearm and some of the hand intrinsic muscles. After this lateral contribution comes off of lateral cord, we'll be left with the musculocutaneous nerve innervating the anterior compartment of the arm. And then after the medial contribution comes off of the medial cord, we're left with the ulnar nerve, which innervates part of the forearm and most of the hand intrinsic muscles. Our last two major branches will come off of the posterior cord. Right here, first we'll have the axillary nerve branch off and dive into the armpit, innervating teres minor and the deltoid. And then we'll have our radial nerve branching as well, right when axillary comes off, which will innervate the posterior compartments of the arm and the forearm. All right, now let's fill in the rest of our smaller branches. The first branch is the long thoracic nerve, which comes from C5, C6, and C7 ventral rami. And this will go down and innervate our serratus anterior muscle. Next is the dorsoscapular nerve, which comes right off of the C5 ventral ramus right here. And this will go back and innervate our levator scapulae and both rhomboid major and rhomboid minor. And then coming off the superior trunk, we have our suprascapular nerve, which will innervate supraspinatus and infraspinatus, as well as nerve to subclavius, innervating the subclavius muscle. All right, and then going down the lateral cord, next we'll have the lateral pectoral nerve, innervating our pectoralis major. And then we'll have the branch of C7 going to ulnar, which connects the lateral cord down to our ulnar nerve. And lastly, going down the path of the lateral cord, after musculocutaneous innervates the anterior arm, it'll give off the lateral antebrachial cutaneous nerve, which will do cutaneous innervation down in the forearm. The posterior cord will directly give off three smaller branches. The first is the upper subscapular nerve, innervating subscapularis. And then we have thoracodorsal, innervating latissimus dorsi. And most distally, lower subscapular, innervating subscapularis and teres major. After innervating teres minor and deltoid, axillary will give off the lateral brachiocutaneous nerve. And then radial itself will give off four smaller branches. The first two are posterior brachiocutaneous and posterior antebrachiocutaneous. And then at the elbow, radial will split into superficial radial, which does cutaneous innervation, and deep radial, which innervates the muscles of the posterior forearm. All right, and finally, off of the medial cord, the first nerve we'll see is the medial pectoral nerve. This will innervate both pectoralis minor and pectoralis major. And then any nerve connecting medial pectoral and lateral pectoral will be our communicans. And then the last two branches off of the medial cord will be our medial brachiocutaneous and our medial antebrachiocutaneous. Okay, the last couple nerves we'll talk about aren't part of the brachial plexus, but you'll need to know them for this class. The first nerve is the phrenic nerve, which receives innervation from both the cervical and brachial plexuses via the ventral rami of C3, C4, and C5. Phrenic will then go and innervate the diaphragm, and the little mnemonic for this is C3, 4, and 5, keep the diaphragm alive. All right, and then the last two nerves are cranial nerves, and these are vagus cranial nerve 10, which will go and do autonomic innervation in the thoracic and abdominal cavities, and then spinal accessory cranial nerve 11, which will innervate the trapezius and sternocleidomastoid muscles.